There are roles, and then there are iconic star-making roles. But just because we appreciate certain characters doesn't mean the actors who played them do. In fact, these performers wish they'd turned down the role that made them famous. Megan Fox seems to regret her harsh words now, but she was once extraordinarily critical of her star-making role as Michaela Baines in Michael Bay's Transformers franchise. She was especially critical of Bay himself. In 2009, she told Wonderland magazine that he had no social skills at all, then doubled down by saying, if Michael Bay ever was in a fight, he would drop to the ground immediately in the fetal position. He would never throw a punch. That man is not a fighter. He's all hot air. And if that wasn't enough, Fox then compared Bay to Hitler, and all this happened in a single interview. Not surprisingly, Fox was replaced in the next Transformers film, Dark of the Moon. Now that she has some distance from that time, Fox can be more reflective, and in an interview with Cosmopolitan, she called her behavior and the subsequent consequences the low point of her career. She admitted, "But without that thing, I wouldn't have learned as quickly as I did. All I had to do was apologize, and I refused. I was so self-righteous at 23. I couldn't see that it was for the greater good. I really thought I was Joan of Arc."
I've always been sort of loudmouthed and obnoxious.
Really?
A little bit. I'm sort of known for my mouth.
Even though she regrets both the role and the way she behaved in regards to it, it's good to know that she learned from the experience. Maybe we'll eventually see her return in Transformers 18. Dear God, the robot now transformed into a planet or something. Twilight star Robert Pattinson, who played sparkly vampire Edward, is just as confused about the films as you are. He's never been shy about admitting how nonsensical the plot is. He told W magazine in 2017, "If it hadn't been so successful, I think people would have thought it was really weird. It's a really weird story, but I think once it becomes mainstream, it's difficult for people to see how strange the story is. Even fans of Twilight would probably tell you how bizarre the story is, but Pattinson has also made no secret of how much he dislikes the film. When Moviephone asked if he would enjoy the films if he hadn't been in them, Pattinson responded, "I think I am a judgmental and cynical person who would just mindlessly hate it without having seen anything. I just think I'm a bad person." The producers must have loved that one. Viola Davis had taken on some meaty roles before starring in 2011's The Help as Aibileen Clark, but the character earned her an Oscar nomination for actress in the leading role and some serious clout in Hollywood. But Davis looks back on The Help with a few twinges of regret. In a New York Times interview, Davis specifically called out The Help for ignoring the point of its black characters and focusing on its central white character. The film has been blasted for falling into white savior tropes, and Davis tends to agree. She told The Times, "I know Aibileen, I know Minnie, they're my grandma, they're my mom, and I know that if you do a movie where the whole premise is I want to know what it feels like to work for white people and to bring up children in 1963, I want to hear how you really feel about it. I never heard that in the course of the movie." Kate Winslet played Rose, the leading lady in one of the biggest blockbusters of all time, and to hear her tell the tale, it was an awful experience.
"Jack, I want you to draw me like one of your French girls."
Winslet has discussed how much she hated doing the nude scene in Titanic, telling V magazine in 2011, "It's a profoundly bizarre thing to do." But there are plenty of other aspects about her performance as Rose that Winslet dislikes. In fact, she thinks her entire performance in the film is dreadful. At the 2012 premiere of Titanic's 3D re-release, she revealed her disdain for what she considers her awful American accent. For having delivered such an iconic, Oscar-nominated performance, she's pretty hard on herself. But it wasn't just her own performance that Winslet hated about Titanic. In an interview with the Los Angeles Times, she dished about some pretty awful conditions on set. She almost drowned on one occasion, and when asked about director James Cameron, she said, "He's a really tough nut to crack. There were times I was genuinely frightened of him." There were long days on set, days that were mostly nights, and Winslet admitted, "I'd never do a shoot for that length of time again. It's hard to hang on to your integrity, your train of thought, what you feel about your character. And for the first time in my life on a film set, I was thinking, I wish I wasn't here." Star Wars is one of the most successful movie franchises ever created, but very few people involved knew what they'll be getting into when George Lucas came calling back in the 70s. That includes the late, great Carrie Fisher.
"I think I am Princess Leia and Princess Leia is me. It's like a Mobius striptease."
The always outspoken Fisher told Today that she would have made a different choice if she'd known how huge the film would become, saying, "I would never have done it. All I did when I was really famous was wait for it to end." At the time, she was a 19-year-old actor looking for her big break. Star Wars certainly provided it and more, including the experience of being told at 5'1" and 105 pounds that she was too fat for the role. There was one costume in particular that drew Fisher's ire, Princess Leia's infamous gold bikini in Return of the Jedi. She told NPR, "When Lucas showed me the outfit, I thought he was kidding, and it made me very nervous. No creases were allowed, so I had to sit very, very rigid straight. But there was one redeeming murderous moment, taking out Jabba the Hutt, Fisher explained. I sawed his neck off with that chain that I killed him with. I really relished that because I hated wearing that outfit, and I couldn't wait to kill him. Audiences weren't the only ones cheering when she murdered that space slug, apparently. At 2, Solo? Harrison Ford is another one who didn't relish the direction the Star Wars films took, and seemed to think that his character, Han Solo, wasn't as interesting as some of his other roles. In fact, Ford was so unhappy with the way his character developed over the course of the original trilogy that he asked Lucas to kill him off at the end of the 3rd film. As his stardom grew, so did his dislike for Han Solo. When his character was finally killed off in The Force Awakens, Ford was asked by the New York Times about passing the baton. He replied, "I don't know what I thought of it that way at all. I was there to die, and I didn't really give a rat's ass who got my sword." It seems that much of Ford's antagonism towards the character came about the time Return of the Jedi was filming, but Ford has never explained why. And considering his prickly responses to questions about Star Wars, it's doubtful we'll find out the real reason anytime soon. Quick, think of a punny way to mock the 1965 classic The Sound of Music. Was it The Sound of Mucus? Because that's apparently how Oscar-winning actor Christopher Plummer, who played Captain Von Trapp in the film, refers to it. When the 36-year-old Plummer was cast in the film, he was already quite an accomplished stage actor and considered the whole project silly.
You may call me Captain.
But that silly little movie made him a huge Hollywood movie star. Still, Plummer, who died in 2021, never hesitated to unleash on The Sound of Music whenever he got the chance. Case in point, at a roundtable interview with The Hollywood Reporter in 2011, Plummer, who was 82 at the time, was asked about the most challenging role he ever played. He surprised everyone by claiming it was Von Trapp. When pressed about why, he laughed and responded, "Because it was so awful and sentimental and gooey." Even by musical comedy standards, Grease 2 is a completely bananas plot. If for some bizarre reason you ever decide to sit down and watch this forgettable sequel, and we're not recommending that you do, you may think you're in for a treat when you discover that it stars Michelle Pfeiffer. Don't be deceived, you will not be in for a treat. Pfeiffer hates the film and her role in it so much that she's actually floated the idea of remaking the original Grease with her playing the role of Principal McGee to publicly atone for her performance as Stephanie in Grease 2. Of her experience in the unnecessary follow-up, Pfeiffer said, "I hated that film with a vengeance and could not believe how bad it was. At the time, I was young and didn't know better. I hear it's a cult movie now." But Grease 2 did help make Pfeiffer a star, and considering some of the amazing roles she's gone on to play, we're glad she can't turn back the hands of time on that one.
Bond. James Bond.
Watching the evolution of Sean Connery's relationship to James Bond is a bit like watching a slow-motion car crash. Connery has always been outspoken, uncompromising, and extremely private, so hearing him discuss his part in creating one of the most famous roles in all of film is fascinating stuff. Connery took on the role of the deadly, womanizing spy in 1963's Dr. No, but when he gave an interview to the New York Times in 1964, he commented, "I would never deny that Bond made me, and I'll be everlastingly grateful to him, but that doesn't make me a Bond slave. I can cut the shackles free anytime I want to, and they aren't made of steel chains any longer either, but smooth as silk." He later told Playboy, "Bond's been good to me, so I shouldn't knock him, but I'm fed up to here with the whole Bond bit." Fed up is a bit of an understatement, as Connery had this to say in 1971, after filming Diamonds Are Forever. "I've always hated that damned James Bond. I'd like to kill him." That escalated rather quickly. Betsy Palmer was an established name before her table-turning role in Friday the 13th, but you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone who remembers her as anything besides Mrs. Voorhees at this point, and Palmer, who died in 2015, certainly wished that wasn't the case. In a behind-the-scenes interview for the documentary Return to Crystal Lake, Palmer revealed why she took the role.
And my agent said, "How would you like to do a movie?" I said, "Great, that'll pay for the car that I want to buy."
When her agent told her it was a horror film, Palmer accepted, but she wasn't thrilled. Then the script arrived.
I read it and I said, what a piece of...
There are, as of now, 12 Friday the 13th films. There were comics, novels, a TV series, and merchandising tie-ins, and Jason Voorhees is one of the most iconic horror villains of all time. Whoops!
When I think of some women's ego, it just makes me sick. I mean, after all, who'd make a better goddess than me?
Just because multiple generations grew up watching a show and loving its characters doesn't necessarily mean that the actors involved share that same fondness. While most of the cast of Gilligan's Island were grateful for the show's impact on their careers and couldn't get enough of reminiscing about it in the decades after it went off the air, Tina Louise wasn't one of them. Louise had a strong body of big screen work, as well as several major stage productions under her belt when she signed on to Gilligan's Island as spoiled movie star Ginger. She was skeptical about taking the role in the first place, fearing she would be typecast, and nearly quit before filming her first scene when she saw what the show had in mind for her character. She honored her commitment and stuck it out for all 3 seasons, but she opted not to return for any of the live-action or animated follow-ups and spin-offs, and to seldom participated in reunions or other celebrations of the franchise. Though Louise continued to find acting work for many years, it's tough to argue that playing Ginger didn't have a negative impact on her career, as the quality of the film roles she landed once the show had run its course paled in comparison to her pre-Gilligan work. To add insult to injury, the show that hurt her career, the one Louise barely wanted to do in the first place, didn't even make her rich. In fact, she recently revealed that she's never received a single penny in royalties from her time playing her most famous role as a glamorous castaway. Before landing breakthrough film roles in movies like The Descendants and The Spectacular Now, Shailene Woodley was known for her television work. The job that really put her on the map was the role of Amy Juergens, the de facto lead character on the ABC Family teen drama series The Secret Life of the American Teenager. Though the show was an ensemble piece with many characters, its central storyline focused on Amy, who finds herself pregnant and faces the struggle of being a teen mom. As it turned out, Woodley wasn't a big fan of the way the show handled those themes. She discussed her issues with the storyline in a 2020 interview with Bustle, explaining, "When I signed on to Secret Life, I read 3 episodes and I signed a contract for 6 years." Woodley says she was impressed by and related to what she saw in those scripts and the depiction of what teenagers go through, saying, "It felt like everything that I wanted to be sending into the world." But according to Woodley, it didn't take long before that message shift. Once the initial episodes were shot, she says the show got a lot more peachy, pushing a message of total abstinence and subsequently shaming Amy, and by proxy, real young women like her for her choices. Woodley said, "There were belief systems that were pushed that were different than my own, yet legally I was stuck there. To this day, it's one of the hardest things I've ever had to do." CBS's 2.5 Men is one of the most successful sitcoms of the 21st century, a consistent ratings winner right up to the end that delivered some of the largest salaries any actor has received in the history of television. As for the reasons why the show was so popular, it's easy to point to its bawdy humor, edgy storylines, and the steady stream of attractive young actresses shown in as much undress as could be gotten away with in a primetime network sitcom. And it's for those reasons that the actor who played the show's titular half-man eventually turned on the series and began to call on audiences to do the same. Angus T. Jones played Jake Harper, son of John Cryer's Alan Harper, for the show's first 10 seasons, winning 2 Young Artist Awards in the process. But Jones didn't like the way his character transitioned to more adult-oriented storylines after Jake, the character, turned 18. The young actor said he didn't yet feel like the adult he was suddenly asked to portray. And once Jones found religion in 2012, his criticisms of the show and its content became much more pointed. In a video for the YouTube channel of the Christian group Forerunner Chronicles, Young didn't hold back.
"Please stop watching 2.5 Men. I'm on 2.5 Men. I don't want to be on it. Please stop filling your head with filth."
Jones has occasionally backtracked about his feelings in the years since, but not consistently.
"Look, up in the sky! It's a bird!
It's a plane!
It's Superman!"
Though he wasn't the first person to portray Superman in live action, George Reeves' take was considered the definitive screen version of the character, basically up until Christopher Reeve took on the cape for the 1978 feature film and its sequels. As for Reeves with an S, he first played the iconic Kryptonian in the 1951 film Superman and the Mole Men, before reprising the role for the super popular Adventures of Superman TV series, which ran for 6 seasons from 1952 to 1958.
"Now I'm going to give you one last chance to stop acting like Nazi stormtroopers."
At first, Reeves relished playing Superman, as well as the fame and adoration that came with it. But a couple seasons in, Reeves grew bored with the role. He felt like the character wasn't growing or evolving, and that he was just doing the same thing over and over again. He also felt that he was being underpaid, and coupled with being in his 40s by this point, he was ready to stop playing a guy flying around in a cape. Reeves wanted to get back to more complex roles, but he found that the Hollywood powers that be could no longer picture him playing anything other than the Man of Steel. About a year after Adventures of Superman ended, Reeves was dead. His death was officially ruled to be the result of a self-inflicted gunshot wound, and many people said he was in a bad state of mind due to the decline of his career. But Reeves' friends and family have long disputed that claim, saying there was never enough evidence to definitively declare his death as a suicide. Before he became famous for playing zombie slayer Rick Grimes in AMC's The Walking Dead, Andrew Lincoln first gained the attention of the global audience as Mark in the classic Christmas rom-com Love Actually. In fact, he was in one of the movie's most famous scenes, standing at Keira Knightley's door while flipping through a stack of poster board cards with romantic messages written on them. In viewings of the movie, plenty of people have come to realize that the story between Mark and Knightley's Juliet isn't as sweet as we originally thought, and among these people is Lincoln himself, and he now regrets having taken the job. Talking to The Wrap in 2016, Lincoln said, "He is a stalker. That was my question to director Richard Curtis. Do you not think we're sort of borderline stalker territory here?" For his part, Curtis swears that neither he nor anyone involved in the movie at the time considered Mark and Juliet's relationship and the famous poster board scene in question to be creepy. That said, the director is willing to admit that he can see why people view it that way when looking back at the film through a more modern and progressive lens.
Yes, I'm George McFly. I'm your density.
Crispin Glover's biggest legacy when it comes to the Back to the Future franchise, at least off-screen, is the battles he had with the studio for using a look-alike actor in the sequel after he chose not to return.
Because of my lawsuit, there are rules in the Screen Actors Guild that make it so producers can never do something like that again. I'm proud of the lawsuit.
But that's only half of the reason why Glover has problems with the franchise. The other half is that he didn't like the way Back to the Future ended. And in the years since, Glover has continued to be vocal about his issues with the movie's overall message. Glover takes issue with the fact that the movie seemed to be saying that things automatically get better for Marty and the rest of the McFly family just because they're richer and have nicer things after the changes Marty makes in 1965. Glover felt it would have meant more for them to just be happier and more content living in the same house, driving the same car, and sitting in the same income bracket they were already in, rather than implying that the McFlys needed more money in order to be content. Glover even tried to bring this up to the film's director and co-writer, Robert Zemeckis, who reportedly didn't take too kindly to the criticism. The end result was that Glover decided not to return as George McFly for the sequels, and mostly distanced himself from the Back to the Future franchise going forward. To this day, he almost never participates in cast reunions, retrospectives, or anything of the sort. It's one thing to regret making a movie because of the effect it had on your career. It's another thing entirely to regret it so much that you feel compelled to ask God for forgiveness. But that's exactly what happened with Mark Wahlberg, who, as of late, has been feeling morally icky for having played an adult film star in the movie Boogie Nights, now that he's reconnecting with his Catholic faith. To be fair, the role that truly made Wahlberg famous was Marky Mark, his stage name as a musician before he ever got into acting. He doesn't have the best feelings about that part of his career either, and he's never had much of a sense of humor about it. And while he was in a few movies before Boogie Nights, including Fear and The Basketball Diaries, most people agree that it's Boogie Nights that established Wahlberg as a legitimate actor to watch, with a performance that suggested that he was destined for great things in Hollywood. This isn't surprising, given that filmmaker Paul Thomas Anderson has always had a knack for coaxing career best performances out of his stars, helping to make people see more in an actor than they previously had. Ultimately, Wahlberg doesn't look at Boogie Nights with gratitude, at least not anymore. In 2017, he told People magazine, "I just always hope that God is a movie fan and also forgiving, because I've made some poor choices in my past. Boogie Nights is up there at the top of the list." His Boogie Nights co-star Burt Reynolds also famously hated the movie and ragged on it for the rest of his life, despite the fact that his work as director Jack Horner earned him his only career Oscar nomination. The truth is, Jennette McCurdy regrets her acting career as a whole. It might have been iCarly that made her famous. She certainly has regrets about that show in particular. But given all we know now about the way McCurdy was treated on that series set, as well as on various other Nickelodeon shows, and the unhealthy and abusive way her mother handled her career, McCurdy could probably choose a completely different, non-acting, non-celebrity life for herself if she had the option. Plenty has been said already about Quiet on Set, the disturbing Max docu-series that ruined childhood memories when it aired in early 2024. Several of the actors who were children or teenagers at the time allege various forms of harassment, abuse, and outright assault at the hands of the adults who worked on many of the Nickelodeon shows of the 2000s and 2010s. McCurdy herself didn't participate in the investigative series, but she had already been vocal about what she went through, both on the set of iCarly and in her career and life during and after the show aired. While McCurdy didn't exactly have a pick of acting gigs after she was done making Nickelodeon shows, that isn't the reason she regrets the time she spent working for the cable network. Truthfully, she regrets just about everything about that time in her life, but it wasn't the roles. It's what she was made to go through during that time that has understandably caused her to look back on her career with negativity.